George Lynch. 2 seconds, 1 second. Kobe pump fake. Kobe for the win. Kobe Bryant.
1-2. He loops out to left field. Going to be a tough play. Jeter on the run. Makes the play. Wow. And flies into the stands. Oh, what a play by Derek Jeter.
Roethlisberger has time. Throws to the back of the end zone. And it is off for a touchdown by Holmes.
Is the Personal Foul Podcast. I'm your host, Colton. Yes, I got a good show on deck. But before we get into that, go check out my latest show featuring one of the newest Pittsburgh Steelers, Chris Wormley. But now we're on to a different gear here. We're going to talk some baseball. Coming on the show this week, special guest, Jake Brown, who covers the New York Mets for the New York Post. Jake, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you can check out Jake's stuff. I talked to him on LinkedIn, but you can find him on Twitter. You can also listen to his podcast about the Mets, Amazin But True podcast. Tell me a little bit about that podcast.
Yeah, it's with the New York Post. We do it twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. It's me and former Met Nelson Figueroa. And it's a good show. We've had, probably best Mets podcast best Mets guest you could have with David Wright, Mike Piazza, Steven Matz, Jay Horowitz, a lot of great guests so far, and people are liking the show so far. So check it out.
Yeah, I've listened to a few shows. Even though I'm not a Mets fan, I want to hear what you talk about on there, and knowing I'm going to have you on. But definitely good content if you're looking for some Mets stuff. I know I got a few friends that are Mets fans. So I thought, hey, you know what, get him a Mets podcast. I had a Yankees one a few weeks ago. Getting into the Mets, tough outing last night against the Nats. Scherzer, 2-1 loss. Porcello coming over from Boston had a good outing, but the Bats just didn't get it done. What have you seen so far? We all thought this season was going to be a lot of stuff with the Bats this year. They had a good, solid lineup. It's not really producing right now, leaving a lot of guys on. What do you think is going on with the Mets right now?
Well, I don't know what it is, because they are better than what their record is, and it's been clutch hitting has been their problem, really. They put guys on and they don't bring them home. Sometimes it's frustrations. Jeff McNeil, after, every time he doesn't get a hit, he's screaming, yelling, and that stuff gets to your head. He had a big double play last night that first and second one out, he moves the guys over or gets a run in, and it's a different ball game, and he didn't do that. So that's been their thing. They've been leaving guys on, and the starters aren't going as long as they need them. Outside DeGrom, they've been very inconsistent. Matz has not been good. Porcello's been inconsistent. Peterson's been solid, but that combined with injuries too now here with Stroman not pitching, and then Brock was out. Brock is back now. They're going to try Gimenez as a starter, see how that works. But it's kind of been a lot of mixing and matching, and guys not hitting in the clutch. And that's they've had 4 or 5. They've had 5 now, I think, 1-run losses. So it's not like they're far away from being a playoff team.
Yeah, the bats just aren't there. You would have thought a lot better. Going into one of their bats that you thought would have been big for them this season, Gimenez Cespedes all of a sudden drops out of nowhere. What's your take on Cespedes? That was the weirdest thing ever. Going into a contract year for your Gimenez, and all of a sudden just disappears. Do you think it's because he wasn't hitting well? Figure the first game he had that home run, which everyone's like, all right, we might have a good Gimenez this year, and disappears from the game. What's up with Gimenez? Any comment on that?
Yeah, well, I commented very much so. I went on a big rant on that Sunday it happened. That Sunday night, I was yelling for like 5 minutes, and Figgy had to kind of calm me down. But I went on like a Mike and the Mad Dog kind of just ridiculous rant because, listen, he noted pre-existing conditions. He could have done that before the year. He didn't apparently tell anyone, which I believe with his track record, and went AWOL. There's multiple ways he could have handled this where he could have Stroman was walking and talking like he was going to be back. And the thing is, he at least put out a statement. He did it before a series started. He did it in the afternoon, hours before a game. He kind of did it a little bit more professionally. And you accept that. And this is frustrating how Cespedes handled it. It wasn't professional. He's going to be a free agent coming off injuries, and it happens to be while he's struggling and the day he wasn't going to play. So it all lines up to not be a good look for him. And it was clear that he wasn't going to hit those incentives. And he said, you know what, $2 million for me isn't worth it to, ride this season out, get benched, not hit incentives, and, maybe risk health. and hurt my chances maybe of getting a deal in the offseason. So a lot of things factored in here, but the way he did it was just not the way you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, he definitely didn't handle professionally. And seeing him at the mall and stuff and going out and at the club, a month prior, it's not a good look at all. And as you just touched on, going into his contract year, do you even think he gets signed? I mean, he hasn't played baseball in a very long time. He struggled at the plate. I get weird situation with this year, but he struggled at the plate other than that first game, hit that home run, struggled at the plate. You think that has anything to do with him dropping out? Him struggling at the plate and keeping him kind of out of the lineup, he's not producing. You think that's also why he dropped out?
Yeah, I think that's probably the main reason he did. If he was hitting, he would have not opted out. So that's the big reason for sure. I do think someone will sign him as a DH. I don't think any team's going to try him as an outfielder, but especially now next year with the universal DH, there's going to be teams that are like, all right, I'll give him a shot, and he'll get one of those incentive kind of deals where it might be a base of $4 or $5 million, but maybe it's $10 million extra if he hits 25 homers, reaches a certain amount of at bats. I see someone taking him. I don't see it being the Mets, but I see someone saying, let's give him a try. And he's going to have to work and stay healthy. And, in this offseason, he's going to have to figure his stuff out because he was behind on pitches. He was swinging and missing a lot, and he looked rusty. And that's, I would have liked to see him ride this down and see if that got better over time. But clearly the frustrations got the best of him, and also the lifestyle. Listen, this is a guy, as you see, I think that video got a little bit overblown, but the kind of lifestyle of let me go out and do some salsa dancing. Let me go out, period. If not, let me go home and play golf and be on my ranch. He can't do any of that, and now that he's chilling, he can. So he was like, you know what, this remaining 50 games is just not worth it for me. I'd rather be, living my life and relaxing than working with this team. So, yeah, I do think his struggles were a big part of why he didn't come back.
Going on to the other guy you mentioned just a minute ago, Marcus Stroman. Again, opted out a different way. Had some injury problems. How disappointing is that for the Mets? I know Walker's out now. It's kind of crazy to think this team a few years ago was based all on its pitching with DeGrom, Syndergaard, those big guys. Now Stroman, they traded for last year. Now you got a few of those arms out. Stroman opting out. Walker hurt for a few weeks here. How hard does that hit the Mets here with Stroman not playing?
I think a lot of it rides on when they could get Walker back, because I don't think Gimenez is the answer as the fifth starter. If Walker can return, I think they'll survive with spot starts with Gimenez and getting Brock back. Getting these middle relief guys back is essential because you don't have to throw the Paul Seabald who got option out there. And I can't watch Paul Seabald. It is just infuriating watching him pitch. So thank God he is off the team. He is garbage. And kind of having these major leaguers in there could fill the void for now. The key really is just, hitting in the clutch. I mean, if the Mets could hit in the clutch, I think they'll get through this. And then if they could get Walker back within 2 weeks, they'll be okay. I mean, again, anything longer, you start to worry because it's such a short season. I mean, we're already August 12th. There's already only 6 to 7 weeks left of the season where it's and you're at a competitive disadvantage with the teams who may not have to go to the full 60 games. MLB's talking about doing it by winning percentage, which I think would really just ruin baseball this season if they have teams not finish 60 games and teams with 40, 45 games have a higher winning percentage who make the playoffs over teams that win 60 would just be the worst thing for baseball. But besides the point, I do think, again, if Walker comes back and is healthy, he struggled first off. So, he had a great start in Boston. After that, he was a little shaky. So if they need a healthy Walker and they need Peterson to really step up, this is, the kid jumped from AA to the big leagues. He's got to really become a really good fourth starter for this team if they want a shot. So far, he's looked good, but we'll see once teams have tape on him if they start hitting him. So far, you like what you see, but that's a rookie. You've got to take that next step pretty damn quick.
Yeah, how disappointing, though, is it for trading for a guy like Stroman for him to not even get a full season with the team? Like, how disappointing is that, trading for a guy like that where, the Yankees were interested in a guy like Stroman and the Mets came in and swooped him up? How disappointing is it, though, that he's not going to get a full year with the Mets and he's going to walk this year?
Yeah, I mean, it is disappointing. But, again, hindsight 2020, COVID has changed a lot of things. And it definitely hurts an already bruised resume for Brody Van Wagenen, who another trade where he gave away prospects. Think about it. He traded two of their top prospects and Kay and Woods Richardson, two pitchers that right now they can use, and Kay is pitching well for the Blue Jays. If Kay comes in the rotation here, you're not even worried. So you're kind of thinking, wow, Kay made it the big leagues fast, and you got 10, 11 starts out of Stroman. It's really a bad look, combined with trading 3 prospects for Keon Broxton, combined with the Edwin Diaz-Cano trade where you traded Kalenic and all these pitchers that they gave away and prospects that really damaged the minor league system, where after Peterson, it is slim pickings when it comes to pitchers right now for this team in the future. And they're all not getting work in this year with no minor leagues. They're going to be a year behind. So he really has hurt the future of this team, Brody, and it is frustrating. I would like to see them bring Stroman back if they can get kind of like a Cespedes, like an incentive-laden deal where maybe you give him $8 to $10 million tops, and then if he makes 30 starts, he gets an extra $6 million, something like that. Where I'd like to see him get a shot because I do like his heart, competitive nature, and all that. But there are a lot of people in Toronto and players that did not like him. Some say he's selfish, the big ego, and everything, where he's larger than life at times. So it is frustrating. But again, it just stands. The only move Brody's made that works was J.D. Davis. It was the only trade really that worked, and then maybe the Justin Wilson signing. Outside of that, it's been a pretty big fail for him so far.
Going into another guy that's struggling at the plate after a great rookie campaign, Pete Alonso. Struggling quite a bit right now at the dish. Do you see him picking it up anytime soon? Because he is struggling.
Yeah, I do think he's going to pick it up. You got to factor in that these hitters are really at a disadvantage over the pitchers because they didn't really have any training. And I know people said, "Oh, he packed on weight." Listen, I love the whole dad bod thing. I got a belly. I respect the belly, and I think that he was behind. I mean, pitchers got to pitch. They had guys to throw to. They could throw against the wall. Hitters, you can't just make up facing live pitching. You just can't. You could have maybe a friend throw you BP. You're not going to face 95-mile-an-hour pitching from April through June. So they have 3 months without hitting. So they're automatically behind, and he's a power hitter. So you take that away, and it's it takes time, and he might have a sophomore slump, but I don't say you throw this year out the window, but if Pete Alonso has a bad year, I'm not going to be like, oh, that last year was such a fluke. I'm going to say work on it in the off season, have a regular spring next year. I also think the fan aspect too. He was a guy that really got fired up by the Citi Field fan base and by fans in general, where that affects the hitter. I mean, when you don't have that motivation behind you, you don't have them chasing records, you don't have let's go Mets chants. I think Pete's a guy who thrives off of that energy. He's the polar bear, and he thrives off the people yelling and cheering his name, and that also factors in too. So I'm not ready to worry yet about Alonso. I mean, give it another 2 weeks, but he's at least hit a few homers. It's not like he's got no homers. He's hit a couple. So we'll see if he can pick it up here in the coming weeks. And also the hot weather. You talk about, I've sweat on my walk to the bodega. He's a fellow fat guy. We sweat so easily that it is the dog days of summer starting off the season. It's a lot to ask for.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything to worry about. I just mentioned with the short season, even if he does struggle this season, it couldn't be worse than Garrett Sanchez at this rate. Geez Louise. But, I don't think there's anything to worry about with Pete. I just wanted to hear what you had to think about him. Going on to another guy you just mentioned a few minutes ago, J.D. Davis. Ever since that switch from the outfield to third base, he's improved that third fielding. That was a good switch with him and McNeil. McNeil going to left field. J.D. Davis hitting the ball pretty well for the Mets. What's your take on J.D. Davis ever since that switch?
Yeah, I mean, he's always hit the ball well. He's hitting it better this year, but last year he was awesome too. That's the one trade Brody made that really helped the Mets. And listen, this was a guy who did it all, played a lot of different positions, but was also a pitcher. He throws 96 miles an hour. They don't want to waste him. They don't want to do the Ohtani route and kind of use him as both, which makes sense. You don't want the guy getting hurt. But his whole thing was, can he play defensively? He's not good in left field. Jeff McNeil can play so many different positions, and it looks solid in the outfield, where you trust Jeff McNeil in left field over J.D. Davis. So I think that worked. His whole thing was, can he make the easy throws to first base? He's looked great. He's better, it seems like, at the tough plays where he doesn't have time to think. When he has time to think for the throw, he's not the same player. But now that he's comfortable, he's in his spot, I think he was kind of worrisome in left field. Now he's hitting, and he's at a position he's pretty comfortable with. He came up kind of as an infielder. So the Mets have tried the whole let's move these infielders to left field and see if it works experiment. And it usually doesn't work. It didn't work with Lucas Duda, didn't work with Dom Smith, hasn't really worked with J.D. Davis, didn't work with Daniel Murphy. I mean, the list is endless from let's move this guy to left field and see how it blows up in our face. But McNeil, we saw him play left, and we especially saw him play great in right field the last couple of years. So I think it's a pretty easy decision to keep McNeil out there and keep JD as your everyday third baseman, which definitely makes things interesting for the infield and guys like Andres Gimenez.
I'm glad you mentioned Andre Gimenez. You're making this easy for me to transition here. Andre Gimenez, he's been quite impressive. It looked like he secured that middle of the infield. Crazy to think, they were talking about it today on The Fan, Maggie and Moose. And it kind of just clicked. This team was, like I mentioned earlier, this team used to be a pitching-dominant team. Now this lineup a little bit this year, more hitting than pitching, with Syndergaard out, Sherman out, and, clearly you got DeGrom still. But now they're finally securing that infield. Gimenez looks really, really good at short. Do you think it's like about time they have something like that there? And not saying Ahmed Rosario was a slap in the face and was a bad shortstop, but Gimenez looks pretty good there.
Well, Rosario is going to stay at short. The plan would likely be Gimenez plays second, and then Cano is going to move to DH, and the DH next year, which there should be. That should be the plan next year, and that also will save Cano from injuries. Cano was crushing the ball before he got hurt. He'll be back, it seems, ready for this weekend. And I just think that's the easiest decision. And listen, Rosario is a good enough hitter and fielder where he'll stay. The thing is third. Now that JD's kind of supplanted himself there, you got to hope that Gimenez is second, Cano's DH. That's what's got to be moving forward. And yeah, he's a spark plug. Listen, he plays defense. He can play any of second, third, short. So I don't think his defense is going to take a hit going to second base. Second base is an easier position than shortstop. I've always said I think second base is the easiest position on a baseball field. Now, it's still difficult, but in terms of you don't need a ton of range on throws. It's just you saw Daniel Murphy thrive at second base. He's not the most athletic guy, but he was good at second. So there's guys who do well at that position who aren't the fittest of guys, and Gimenez is. So he steals, he gets on base, he plays defense. He's got a little pop, not too much, but I hope he's their second baseman. Cano really put them in a weird spot, but thankfully the DH might be what saves Cano and allows him to be a DH in his late 30s here. Listen, his contract's going to end when he's 40 years old, and if you could have Cano as your DH at ages 39, 40, it takes a lot of pressure off him, and it puts a lot of pressure on Brody and the Mets to not have him live up to these crazy expectations where all he's got to do is hit. And that's usually not his problem. It's fielding where he gets a little lazy and sometimes gets hurt.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot easier if they have this solid infield set up with Ahmed Rosario and Gimenez, and as you said, with the DH with Cano. He was hitting the ball very well early on before he did get hurt. But at the same time, if he doesn't get hurt, you might not see Gimenez like he did this time around.
Well, we didn't know Gimenez was going to make a team. I said this on the show the other day. Gimenez went overnight from why is he on the roster to how is he not in the lineup. He needs to be an everyday player. And I know tonight he's not in the lineup, which, I mean, he should be in there every night. There should be no excuse. I don't care if it's a lefty pitching or righty. He should be there every night just because of the spark plug that he is. And he's so young that you don't have to worry about rest. The guy's 21 years old. I get it here and there. He's not going to start 7 times a week, maybe 5 to 6, but he could spell Rosario some days. He could spell J.D. Davis some days. He could spell McNeil. Sometimes with those lefties, he's not going to play. So it'll depend on the pitcher as well. But he really makes life easier when they do get Cano back where they can mix and match. And, I think it's a weird position because you have Nimmo and McNeil at the top. But Gimenez, man, it's definitely a lot of pressure being at the top of the lineup. But the way he could really score runs, get on base, steal bases, makes him in the future, if the Mets wanted to, make him a top-of-the-order guy. But I think it's pretty dangerous having maybe him at 9 and then Nimmo at 1. You kind of have like a double leadoff hitter situation when it gets to the third inning.
Yeah, going into our next topic, before I go into Steve Cohen, there's also been talks about going out and getting a guy like JT Realmuto from the Phillies. Wanted to hear what you had to say about that. I know they've been talking about that a little bit. Because, again, one of those situations, Ramos is probably gone after the season. Do you go out and get a guy like JT?
Yeah, I would love to. I think the thing is, hopefully there's new ownership then, and by then they'll reach into their pockets because that's what it's going to take. to pay this guy he might be a $20 million a year catcher. And I'm not a big pay that much money unless your name is Mike Piazza for catchers. But I don't dislike Wilson Ramos, but I can very much live without him on the New York Mets in 2021. If they'll pay it, I'm all in for Real Muto, but we'll see. That'll depend on ownership, because if the Mets send an offer right now, the Wilpons, it would be something like 2 years, $30 million, where he'll get more elsewhere. So, listen, if they'll dive in their pockets and they'll still have money to spend elsewhere, I would love for them to finally get a good hitting catcher, good defensive catcher, because listen, Ramos has been tough to watch behind the plate, and he's really been kind of a singles hitter. He's a single or bust. He's got no speed. He's not been the best defensively, so he's kind of a very one-dimensional player where he might hit 280, 290, but it's going to be either a single or homer and then spread out a couple doubles.
Going into our next topic here, you just talked about ownership and talking about JT and the price tag. Will the Mets sell? Will the Wilpons sell the Mets to Steve Cohen? I mean, geez Louise, I think it'd be good for baseball, good for New York, man. Imagine having the Mets and the Yankees willing to open up the books. Lord. So do you think Cohen ends up getting this team, or will the Wilpons even sell it to Cohen?
I mean, there'll be a new owner. I hope it's Cohen. I still think A-Rod's group has a shot. I do think Cohen gets to the end. He's got the big bucks by himself. He's the one that could, just outbid most. I know that Harris Blitzer bid with the Adelson and, the billionaire casino guy. They got a ton of money as well. But I really do think Cohen's the guy, the Mets fan. And it seems like the Wilpons want anyone else. Mets fans want Cohen, and the Wilpons want whatever the Mets fans don't, which is frustrating. That's speculation. It's not fact. But I do think Cohen, when it's all said and done, hopefully in these coming month or two, I know the bids are end of the month coming up here, so I think maybe before the end of the season we might finally have a new owner. And if whatever is reported is true, I mean, man, the Wilpons got to feel pretty dumb now, because now the price tag has gone down. If he's really going to do $2 billion for Mets and $2 billion for SNY, it's almost just highway robbery if that happened, because SNY is not even worth $1 billion. So he would be just giving them, extra Christmas money at that point if he's going to pay 2 and 2. And if they did the original 2.6, it would have been smarter, because the value, obviously, with no fans this year for the Mets has gone down. I mean, they're losing millions of dollars every game with no one in the building. So they just need to get this done and cut their losses and ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for baseball. I know a lot of owners don't want to see it happen with Cohen, because he will open up the books. I'd love to see it. I love kicking on the Mets as a Yankee fan and them not getting all these guys. But I think it would be great for New York to see Cohen get the team and open up the books, as we just said, with JT Realmuto being one of those guys to open the books for, where if the Wilpons are still in charge and running that team, you're probably not seeing that happen. So I think it'd be good for baseball. As much as the other owners don't want to open up the books and see Cohen run it up, I think it'd be good for New York, and I think it'd be great for baseball just to see the Mets with some action here with Cohen running things. So pretty much overall, what do you see going on with the Mets the rest of the season? Do you see the bats heating up a little bit when Cano gets back into the lineup? I know, like we just talked on earlier, pitching, there's a lot of injuries. Where do you see the Mets finishing out this season?
I think they will be in the playoffs because there's 16 teams. I think if it was 10, at this point, it's still early, but I'd be more hesitant to say they're in the 10 team. But I think they'll get in the 16 because, listen, there's going to be teams under 500 that make it. I mean, it's sad to say, but that's probably going to be the case, where it's going to maybe be 3 teams in the NL East. It's automatically top 2. The Mets could finish in third and very much still make it. There's going to be 2 third-place teams likely that make the playoffs in the National League. So I do think the Mets will be one of those final wild card teams and get in. And from there, we'll see. I mean, if they're healthy and they're playing better at that time, they got a shot. I mean, with DeGrom getting 2 starts in series, you could have 2 wins right there. So if they could muster up, Rick Porcello's been there. Matz is just so wildly inconsistent that you worry. It definitely hurts not having Stroman or Syndergaard for the playoffs, but I do think they'll sneak in. I do think the bats will heat up. And if they don't, man, what a disgrace. Because, listen, they've had injuries, and we'll see if there's, knock on wood, hopefully there's no more. But, they haven't had enough injuries where they should be playing this bad. And they're not a train wreck. It's like they still won 7 games, but, they should be at least a 500 team. So, we'll see in 2 weeks what happens. It's still early, and I know it's hard to say it's still early in the 60-game season, but I don't think it's time to just say, oh, season's over right now, just because, they still get to play the Marlins a bunch. They still have games against winnable teams. So I do think they get in the playoffs.
Easy with that, Jake. I mean, the Marlins are first place in the division right now. Jeez.
Well, you're playing bad teams like the Orioles 5 times. You're going to get automatic. I mean, the Orioles are as worse as they are. And the Marlins, actually, the lineup is not bad. It was their pitching that surprised people with all these minor leaguers going out there. But their lineup is not the one that really got COVID. So they have a respectable lineup where you're not going to write them off, but the Mets got to win every series they play against. I mean, you got to win 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 games, even 9 out of 10 games against the Marlins, because there's not enough wins to go around, because the other teams in the NL East are solid teams. I mean, the Nationals are a good team. The Braves, even with their injury, they're still a good team. The Phillies have a good lineup. Their pitching's not very good, but they still have a good lineup. So, you got to beat the teams you should in this shortened season. If you don't, those are the couple games that'll kill you.
Yeah, don't even mention injuries to me. During our show, I just saw Aaron Judge is out of the lineup tonight. How does that look for Aaron Boone? Jeez Louise, saying, yeah, I took him out.
Well, Judge wanted to play, and Boone's sitting him as a precaution. I know everyone's, another Judge injury, and I get it. But I think the fact that Judge wanted to play shows you it's not serious, and they're just playing it safe. And the Yankees are good enough; they can live without him for one game. But if it goes a couple more games, again, you're going to have everyone chirping, and we'll be talking about it on Pinstripe Pod tomorrow. On Thursday, we got Luis Sojo coming on, and we'll be talking about, this guy's fragile, he can't stay healthy, Stanton's out, Judge, here they go again. The Bash brothers can't stay on the field, but we'll see in a day or two. I know they have 2 off days in the same week, which is just insane this early in the year to have 2 off days in one week. But, we'll see this weekend. I think Judge, they're playing it safe because, listen, if he gets an off day Wednesday, he's off. They're off Thursday. Yeah. That's an extra day for him to rest, and it's honestly probably a logical move. If there's anything that you give him that 2 days instead of just 1.
This is not going to get me started on these 2. I mean, geez Louise. But, again, Jake, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You can follow Jake on Twitter at Jake Brown Radio. Also, check out his Amazing But True podcast. Hear anything about the Mets. This was a Met pod. Anything you want to hear about the Mets, that is the podcast. Go check out. Jake, I really appreciate you coming on.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
You can follow the Personal Foul Podcast on Twitter at Foul_podcast. You can find the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, that's where we're at. And that's a wrap.